Welcome to Kehen Fortress, my compacted and minimised Minecraft recreation of Buhen, Egypt's unbreakable border stronghold from 4,000 years ago. Built at the Second Cataract in Nubia to guard the Nile's southern frontier, Buhen policed trade in gold, ivory and slaves, while projecting pharaonic power to the south. Today we'll tour this beast, its killer defences, gridded garrison town and sacred heart. Stick around to see how these forts formed Egypt's wall across the cataract and how they formed their southern border defences, controlling trade, migration and soldier movements down the Nile into Nubia. Buhen's front entrance was a masterful defensive trap on the northern wall, channeling attackers into a multi-chambered gatehouse flanked by towers. A Nile-fed rock-cut moat that was about 3 metres deep forced foes across a narrow bridge into the outer gate, exposed to flanking fire from bastions. As you pass through the fortress's entrance and kill zones, you'd find a fully self-sufficient city, even including commemorative stelae like this one here. Fields of typical crops such as emmer wheat, barley and flax would have supplied the fortress, with cattle storage areas and typical Egyptian mud brick houses being located in the outer circuit of the fortress itself. In many senses, fortresses like Buhen were permanent machines of trade and war, operating efficiently at their own functions. Bakeries would have been very important features of this machine, providing food to soldiers and families working or stationed at the fortress, likely being located adjacent to grain stores that effectively served as banks. Egyptian soldiers were paid in grain, beer and oil, and bakeries allowed them to turn this grain into food. Grain stores were also incredibly important for taxation purposes, with temples and fortresses serving as the major economic hubs in the empire, collecting tax, distributing grain payments and storing it in reserves like a bank. This system persisted until the Roman annexation of Egypt, much later in its history. Whilst fortresses would have had their own protective fields, these places were well supplied with Egyptian supplies from the north, with internal fields to protect soldiers and families in siege events. Such fortresses would have housed a variety of different people from various professional backgrounds, from blacksmiths to farmers to miners and to traders. These fortresses are best described as walled cities, not typical to ancient Egypt, but walled cities that were highly optimised for serving the military as well as trade purposes, serving as an effective economic hub on the southern border of the Egyptian Empire. This extended to things such as copper workshops that processed locally mined copper into weapons and crafts for sale amongst the army, but also to people living locally to the fortress on the Nubian border. Again, this idea reinforces these fortresses as economic hubs rather than solely being military bases. The walls of the fortress would have included internal staircases that help you traverse the 5 metre thick, 10 metre high mud brick walls with rare stone facing that allowed for longer longevity, projected bastions let archers rain flanking fire, while inset buttresses braced against rams. Crenellated parapets hid 300 specialist bowmen peering through angled slits, standing in kneeling rows for non-stop volleys. In my example, I've scaled this down. I've kept that lethal profile that is present in the fortress of Buhen. Walls would have extended out towards the river edge as well, protecting both sides of the fortress from riverine attack as well as land-based attack from Kushite raiders and invasions from the south. The outer circuit of these fortresses would have also held examples of administrative buildings mostly found in the inner circuit of the fortress itself. This could have included functions such as copper storage and administration purposes, with odd barracks located in this outer circuit, as well as more grain silos, and perhaps more prestigious housing for people who manage trade, commerce, and other such activities that would have occurred in the outer circuit of the fortress itself. In this example here, I've built what I've called the Trade Magistrate's Villa, effectively the person who would have managed trade and commerce inside the fortress. This house is located towards the back of the fortress alongside the river, with a secret entrance that leads into the inner circle of the fortress, where many other administrative purposes would have taken place that they would have been involved in. Just because it was a fortress would not have meant that it would not have had any decorative features at all, such as sphinxes, statues and stelae as mentioned before. Small statues and sphinxes may have flanked ceremonial routes into the fortress, as well as temple entrances. The heart of the fortress was where the elite command was located. High officials ran operations from columned halls, with scribes' offices tracking tribute, tax, and operations of soldiers. Armory stocked spears and bows, with kitchens located in the inner circuit to feed both soldiers and the administrative elite. In this example here, we've got a small trade office that would have housed scrolls and books. We also have an armory to the side over here that would have hosted spears, armour, and different types of weapons that would have needed repairing. And down this corridor here would have hosted the barracks, where most of the soldiers would have slept in the inner circuit of the fortress. This would have been complete with a variety of beds and would have housed various soldiers in each room. This would have included things such as their personal items like scrolls, weapons, and other personal items like trinkets that they would have used for religious beliefs. This inner circuit would have also included the kitchen, as noted before. This building would have had access to a lower storage pantry, where many of the more perishable goods would have been stored. Lower down in the ground was where it was colder, so that's where things would have lasted longer. This was a typical Egyptian storage method for perishable items. The other side of the inner circuit was where the command centre was located. This would have been one of the more decorated buildings, including a columned hallway, various office spaces, storage spaces for scrolls and important documents, and it would have been the place where all operations inside the fortress would have been managed, as well as trade operations to the south into Nubia, as well as diplomatic relationships with the capital city and the Kushite kingdom to the south. This room to the back here demonstrates the commander's office. The inner circuit would have certainly been more decorative and ornate. It might not have hosted so many plants as can be seen here. However, it would have had more specific officer housing. So this housing right here includes storage areas for weapons and smaller apartments for officers that were more fancy and nicer than the typical barracks that lesser soldiers would have been housed in. This is just one example of what more higher ranking officers and officials would have been housed in the inner circuit. As part of the administrative services inside the inner circuit would have housed storage areas for more valuable products, such as incense, perfumes, and ivory. It also would have included banks for grain, as would have been hosted in the outer circuit. These internal circuit granaries may have been specific to the payment of officers, officials, and the taxation of more valuable products such as ivory. This internal circuit also would have included some sort of house or villa for the main commander of the fortress, which would arguably would have been the most luxurious of all the housing inside the inner circuit of the fortress, perhaps with balconies and views out to the rest of the fortress to manage lesser officials and soldiers on their day-to-day activities. It also would have hosted some storage and administrative purposes for the commander's day-to-day work. Later into the Middle Kingdom, temples were built inside of fortresses, so that soldiers and officials could participate in day-to-day prayer activities. In the fortress of Buhen, Queen Hatshepsut later built the Temple of Horus, a typical smaller-style Middle Kingdom temple. The Sanctuary of Horus linked military might to the divine order, where the pharaoh is a living incarnation of Horus and the protector of the land. In my example of Kehen, I've built both the Temple of Horus and the Shrine to Ra, who is later merged with gods Amun and Osiris within the Middle Kingdom period. These temples would have been very functional in size, and not as impressive as those found in later New Kingdom examples in New Kingdom cities, such as Thebes. However, these temples very much would have served the day-to-day purposes that they would have been required for soldiers and the officials that visited the temple. Walking back out towards the river alongside the walls, it would have been seen that there were areas that extended out overlooking the farms, overlooking the central circuit and outer circuit, but also overlooking the river. with parts that would have extended out into the river and onto the riverbanks that would have helped defend entrances against landing invaders, but also attackers on the main entrance to the south, where much of the commerce and traders landing in boats would have arrived from. This tower that extends out to the river here has a clear view of the river itself, but also the adjacent riverbanks where people could have been hiding in reeds, as well as also allowing soldiers to properly assess the dangers that would have been faced by soldiers in terms of animals, from crocodiles and hippopotamus that would have been roaming this region of the Nile in this time period. The riverside entrance would have also hosted a kill gate, as demonstrated here, where soldiers would have been trapped when attacking the fortress in an area where soldiers above could fire many arrows down, effectively blocking off the main gate entrance to too many people crowding around the entrance, but also as an effective defense strategy for when people attacked the main gate. This is probably not somewhere where you would have wanted to be stuck when you just jumped off a boat trying to attack the fortress of Buhen. River edge entrances would have also allowed effective taxation of ships that arrived at the fortress, with such gates also designed to properly manage the flow of people that entered the fortress and the number of traders to be taxed. Alike towards the front of the fortress, the riverside fortifications of the fortress would have had deep moats that often would have filled with water during the flood season. It also would have included swampy areas where crocodiles and other dangerous animals would have been hiding, as well as fortified buttress structures such as these that would have defended much of the structure above in the heavy flooding season of the Nile. South of the Second Cataract, much of the ships that would have been present would have been smaller boats. However, that does not mean that there were larger ships that were not present in this region, particularly including military ships and trading ships that would have wanted to sail south to interact with the Kushite kingdom in Nubia. This unfortunately would have included the movement of people through both forced and voluntary methods. And there you have it, that's Kehen, my compacted version of the fortress of Buhen, Egypt's Nubian sentinel. Unfortunately, this site has now been lost to the Aswan Dam, which means that there is little more that's likely going to be discovered about this incredible historical site, and research for this example is actually quite difficult, the limited information that was collected before the construction of the Aswan Dam, and the fact that it just cannot be visited now, and it's likely that it's totally destroyed underwater. I really hope you've enjoyed the video, guys. Let me know what you think of the fortress in the comments below, and the video style. The next fortress I'm going to be building is likely going to be a Greek fortress or a Roman fortress. I know lots of you have been asking for a proper Roman fortress, so I'm going to be doing that one next. But in the meantime, make sure to like and subscribe, and until the next one, goodbye.